Hey you guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Alex and I absolutely love makeup, and of course my life is full of mayhem, hence Alex's Makeup and Mayhem. And I really just love paranormal stories and activity, and this one kind of just blew my mind because of the involvement of DCS and police and hospital workers and all these people just being witness to all of these things. Now, if you like to see more videos like this one, because we're just kind of trying this out, let me know by either subscribing, commenting, giving it a thumbs up. That lets me know and YouTube know that you would like to see more videos like this one, and I will definitely make some more because I love this kind of stuff. So let's get right on into it. Now, this portal to hell was supposedly located in a town called Gary in Indiana. So Gary, Indiana, and we're gonna go all the way back to November of 2011, and a woman named Latoya Ammons. Now, Latoya was a single mom of 3. She had 2 boys, ages 7 and 9, and then a girl at age 12. And like most single moms out there, she was struggling financially. She was looking for new hopes, new beginnings, just she wanted a fresh start. And that's kind of what she thought she found when she found this little house on Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana. She thought, okay, this is like the perfect place for us. It was a little ranch style home, so 1 level, and then it had a basement underneath of it. Now, at the time, this house that she was renting was owned by a man named Charles Reed. Now, about a month after she moved in, and I really tried to look and figure out when her mother's name is Rosa Campbell. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to call Mom, Latoya Ammons, we're going to call her Mom. And then we're going to call Rosa Campbell, which is Latoya's mother, we're going to call her Grandma. So that way nobody gets confused. No disrespect, again, just for the purposes of this video. So at some point between November and December, apparently Grandma moved in, and Mom and Grandma started noticing some like really weird things. And the first thing was the house had a screened in porch, right? And so, screened in porch, whatever temperature it is outside, that's what it is on that porch. But this screened in porch started getting these like big black flies everywhere. And they, the more they kept killing them, the more they kept coming, and they couldn't understand, and if you're not familiar with Gary, Indiana, let me tell you guys, in December, it's colder than a witch's titty in Alaska. So there should not be any flying insects at all, let alone some big giant black flies everywhere. Now, that wasn't the only strange happening that was going on. After midnight, both Grandma and Mom both said that they would occasionally hear the heavy clump of footsteps climbing the basement stairs. And of course, when they would, investigate, nothing would be there. And then they would also hear the door to the basement, which was in the kitchen. They would hear that opening and closing. So they started locking it, and they would hear somebody rattling it and banging on it. And again, still hear footsteps, and they would investigate, nothing would be there. And then Grandma reported that one night she woke up and saw a shadowy figure of a man pacing in the living room. And of course, she leapt out of bed, went to investigate, and there was nothing there except for a wet set of footprints. Now, on March 10th of 2012, so just a couple of months later, around 2 a.m. Now, normally Mom and Grandma would have both been asleep at this point, but they just had a death of a family member. And you guys know how that goes. You have a funeral, and afterwards everybody comes back to your house, friends and family, and you guys, talk about all the good times you had with that person and how much you miss them and that kind of thing. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the mom screams bloody murder. And so the grandma runs in, and some friends and family members run in, and the 12-year-old girl is supposedly levitating, mid-air. Now, what's crazy, if it was just the mom and grandma saying this, I'd be like, But again, there were many witnesses, people that didn't even like the mom and grandma, that were like, yeah, I saw that. It was some crazy ass shit. Now, at that point, Grandma tells Mom, listen, we need to get some help. We need God. We need Jesus. We need something up in this place, because this just ain't working out. So they start calling around some churches and stuff, trying to get some help. But of course, a lot of the churches and stuff, you know, wouldn't even return their call. I mean, think about it. If you owned a church and somebody called you and said, I think something paranormal was going on in my house, would you return their call? I guarantee a lot of them probably didn't. So now this next part is up for some debate, because some people say that the mom and grandma actually did get in contact with a church, and the church told them to perform a cleansing or smudging of their house, which I have a problem with, because as you guys know, I used to apprentice for a priest, and we would never tell one of our members to go ahead and smudge or cleanse their house if they had paranormal activity, because it's just going to make activity ramp up. And then other people said that the mom and grandma actually contacted a clairvoyant and was told that there was over 200 spirits in their home and also a gateway to hell. And then some people said that they actually performed some summoning rituals and tried to actually contact and find out what the ghost wanted to try to expel them that way. All of which, by the way, are just really bad ideas. Now, depending on whose story you want to believe, whether they were actually trying to do a cleansing or a summoning, either way, activity started to ramp up, which is, I mean, it's expected. The mom at that point reported that she started feeling taken over by something. And then the youngest son would sit for long periods of time in the closet talking to himself, and there was, of course, nobody there. And then he would start describing being murdered and what it felt like to be murdered. And then when he was asked, how do you know that? He would say, well, my friend told me. And the mom also reported that her son flew out of the bathroom as if he had been thrown. And then another time that a headboard flew over and smacked her head and the daughter so hard that it actually caused her to have to go and get stitches. So this would be getting really bad at this point. The grandma reported that things started getting so bad that on some nights they just had to stay in a hotel room. Now, finally, in just absolute desperation, I don't know what the heck that just was, they ended up taking the kids to their family doctor, Dr. Joffrey Anagwaku. I cannot pronounce his name. I'm sorry. No disrespect. I will put his name down below. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to call him Dr. Joffrey. So on April 19th, mom and grandma take the kids to see Dr. Joffrey. And later on, Dr. Joffrey would report to the media that it was quote unquote bizarre. And quote, in 20 years, I have never seen or heard anything like that in my life. I was scared myself when I walked into the room, end quote. Now, past those couple of comments, he really wouldn't speak in more detail unless the mom had a psychiatric clearance for the waiver of confidentiality that she had originally signed so that the media could investigate into her claims. Now, the mom had been very forthcoming when all of this story broke out and everything. Like I said, she signed a confidentiality waiver, giving access to the media, to all of the records and everything. But Dr. Joffrey kind of wouldn't let go of his records. And I think I know why. It's my speculation, completely 100% my opinion and speculation. But I think that he was the one that called DCS, because when you call DCS or CPS, depending on where you live, social services essentially, you have to, if you're a doctor or a staff member at the doctor's office, you have to write it down in your notes. But when you actually call them, it's not written in the DCS or social services person's notes because it's anonymous, right? So I think he didn't want it getting out that he was the one that called. Again, this is my speculation, and you guys give me your comments down below. Let me know what you think, because in the over 800 pages worth of reports and medical notes and investigations that the media did obtain, from Dr. Joffrey's medical notes, there were some comments in there, one of which was, quote, delusions of ghosts in home, end quote, and, quote, hallucinations. He also wrote, quote, history of ghosts at home and delusional, end quote. Now, what happened next was not only detailed in the DCS reports, police reports, medical records, reports of interview with the medical staff, but I mean, this was just absolute chaos and craziness, you guys. And this is why I think this story caught so much attention and why I was so interested in it, quite frankly. So while at one of Dr. Joffrey's visits, the 9-year-old boy started cursing Dr. Joffrey in demonic voices and was raging at him. The medical staff then noted he was, quote, lifted and thrown into the wall without anyone touching him. And again, this was in the DCS report. The boys then abruptly passed out and would not come to. So the mom and grandma, of course, I mean, think about it. If your kid just got thrown out, you're going to run over, you're going to be cradling them. Oh my God, are you okay? They're passed out. So this medical staff at that point calls 911 and emergency personnel shows up. They take the boys to Methodist Hospital campus located there in Gary, Indiana, which is where the boys later ended up coming to at. Now, when the boys finally did come to, the older boy, who was 9 at the time, he was perfectly fine. He acted like, he didn't really know what was going on, but perfectly fine, completely natural. Now the youngest boy started screaming and thrashing, and then it was reported that it took 5 men to hold him down inside the hospital. So this is when somebody apparently called DCS in to investigate mom for possible child abuse and neglect. The caller, who of course is not named, speculated that the mom might have a mental illness, and they believed that the children were performing for the mom and she was encouraging their behavior. So at this point, DCS family case manager Valerie Washington was assigned to the Ammons family case, and she gave the following accounts of the entire situation on her. This is on her official report, and I will link the reports down below for you guys. So it says hospital personnel examined mom and her children and found them to be healthy and free of marks or bruises. A hospital psychiatric evaluated mom and determined that she was, in fact, of sound mind. Washington interviewed the family in the hospital. While she spoke with the mom, the 7-year-old boy started growling and showing his teeth. His eyes would then roll in the back of his head. The boy then locked his hands around the older brother's throat and refused to let go until adults pried his hands open. Side note, I would like to say that this little base blue ghosty sponge here is like the most perfect sponge for just like getting like his little ghosty butt. I think I've told you guys about this before, but yeah, I freaking love this little sponge. All right. Now, later that evening, Washington and registered nurse Willie Lee Walker ended up bringing the 2 boys into a small examining room to interview them. So the mom wasn't there, but the grandma did in fact join them. At that point, the 7-year-old boy stared into his brother's eyes and began to growl. He stated, quote, "It's time to die," the boy said in a deep, unnatural voice. Also, "I will kill you." Now, while the youngest boy spoke, the older brother started head-butting the grandma in the stomach. Grandma then grabbed her grandson's hands and started praying. Now, what I'm getting ready to tell you guys next, this would not only rattle, all of the staff, all of the witnesses, but for some, this is kind of what offered like a lot of proof that this was in fact paranormal activity and nothing else, because the event was written in the DCS report and corroborated by not only Nurse Walker, but also the psychologist that was in the room. So the 9-year-old boy got a weird grin on his face and he walked backwards up a wall onto the ceiling, flipped over the grandma, never letting go of her hands. The caseworker and the psychologist ran screaming, terrified, out of the room, just complete shock and terror, which I have to be honest, if I was there, I would have probably been the same way. Let's be real here. So after this happened, of course, doctors tried to explain it. They tried to get the boy to do it again. Of course, he couldn't. And not only could he not, but he didn't even remember that it even happened. Now, at this point, and I'm going to be honest, you guys, I've got my own opinions and feelings on this. You can let me know yours down below, but I'm going to keep mine to myself, okay? But DCS did take the emergency steps of taking custody of the kids without a court order. So this is something that, it takes a lot for them to be able to do something like that. And Valerie stated on her DCS report that, quote, "All of the children were experiencing spiritual and emotional distress." Again, I will link the DCS form down below. So on April 20th of 2012, at that point, that is when the hospital chaplain ended up reaching out to a local priest named Father Maginot. Now, Maginot had been a priest at the St. Stephen Martyr Parish in Maryville for more than 10 years. And never in all of that time had he ever received a phone call like this one. And they actually asked him to perform an exorcism on the 9-year-old Ammons boy, which, I mean, if you guys don't know, exorcisms are extremely dangerous, and yeah, so that's pretty wild that they would ask them to do that. So of course, Father Ammons was like, I'll tell you what, this is what I'll do. I'll go interview the family after Sunday Mass, which was just a couple of days later. So that's what he ended up agreeing to do. The first step, Father Maginot said, was ruling out any natural causes that Latoya Ammons and her family may have been experiencing. So he ended up visiting the mom and grandma in their Carolina Street home on April 22nd of 2012. So keep in mind, at this point, DCS does have custody of the kids. Now, the first 2 hours that Father Maginot was there, the, mom and grandma, they're like, of course, explaining to him all of the paranormal activity that had been going on, everything that they had been experiencing. But the interview got interrupted because the grandma points over to the bathroom light and it's flickering. At that point, Father Maginot walks over, starts to investigate it. As soon as he gets close enough, it stops happening. He would walk away, it would start happening again. And then later on, it got interrupted again because the Venetian blinds started swinging back and forth. Now, there was no air current, no open windows or doors. There was no explanation for these blinds to be moving the way that they were. Now, Maginot contributed both of these happenings to a demonic presence. He also said that he saw wet boot prints on the floor at a couple different times when he was walking around, just investigating, looking around and stuff, which if you remember, the grandma also said that she had seen earlier on. And then the mom started complaining of having a headache, and Maginot said that she would convulse every time he would put a crucifix on her head. So after a 4-hour-long interview, Maginot said that he was convinced that the family was, in fact, being tormented by demons. He also believed that there were ghosts in the house as well. So he blessed the house before he left, and he told the mom and grandma to go stay with some friends or family members because, as I said, if there is something going on and you bless the house, especially demons, it's going to aggravate things. It always does. So I don't see, you guys see what I'm saying? I don't see a church telling them to bless the house themselves and then stay there. So yeah, Maginot did the right thing. He blessed it and said, hey, you guys got to go stay somewhere else because things are about to get off the chain. So Latoya and her mom did heed his warning. They went and stayed with a relative or family member, but they had to come back about a week later to let Valerie Washington in, along with the Gary, some members of the Gary Police Department, because they had to perform a wellness check, because keep in mind, they do have her kids at this point. They're investigating her and her family's claims, which means they need to come and investigate the house. Now, at that point, the kids also had not been attending school either, so they were trying to figure out why they weren't attending school. So the police officers that were there that day were Captain Charles Austin, Chief Brian Miller, and Lieutenant John Greska, all of which who were skeptics, by the way, prior to entering the house, and they all of which became witness to a lot of the paranormal activity in their police reports and on their recordings, which we're going to talk about. But keep in mind, this was all during broad daylight, okay? Now, while the police are there, of course, they're investigating. They're, checking out all these claims, and they've got like little voice recorders. They've got cameras. They're taking pictures. One of the police officers was actually taking pictures on his iPhone. And of course, they go down in the basement and they find some kind of weird things. One of which as I told you guys, we don't know if they were summoning demons or they were trying to, you know, expel them, but they did find like a little altar with like an open Bible and a candle that had been burnt. They also found many candles that had been burning like all over the house. And one of the police officers that was holding the recorder, I think that was Lieutenant John Greska, he actually makes a comment and states that he doesn't see how the fire department had not been called yet because of all the candles that were burning. And you hear a voice. Nobody knew who it was. It didn't belong to any people that were there, but you hear them say, "Hey."
Oh, they're burning stuff all over the place here. That's where. I'm surprised the fire department hasn't been here.
And I have listened to this recording and I can confirm with you guys, it definitely sounds like a hay for sure. I'm sorry, I've got like a little hair or something right here. Okay. Now, they also experienced one of the basement doors. So when you go downstairs in the basement, there was like a little room off to the right. And apparently, come to find out later, somebody had shot and killed themselves in that room. But again, nobody knew this at the time that all of this was going on. But that door to that room was opening and closing on its own. They also had a lot of equipment malfunctions. And Lieutenant Greska also took a lot of photos, as I said, of the house and inside of the house. And in one of the photos of the basement stairs, there was a cloudy white image in the upper right-hand corner. Now, when an officer enlarged the photo, this was back at the station, that cloud appeared to resemble a face. And this is in the Lake County Police records. This is what the records state. The enlargement also revealed a second green image that police say looked like a female. Now, Captain Charles Austin also snapped some pictures, as I said, with his iPhone. And he said that he found several like different like cloudy figures and mist and things like that. And that there was quite a few silhouettes in them. Now, Captain Austin believed that whatever was going on in that house had something to do with not really so much just the basement, but underneath the basement stairs. Because you see, when you walk downstairs in the basement, the entire basement was paved with the exception of a small, like 6x6 area right underneath the stairs. And it was just dirt. That was it. And he thought that was really very, very weird. And he said he got like a really weird vibe from that area. Now, after Captain Charles left the residence, he got in his car and he drove about approximately 1.5 miles to a local gas station. Now, while he was parked in this parking lot of the gas station, all of a sudden his AM/FM radio, so this was in his police cruiser, started changing back and forth and then stopped on complete static. And then he heard a voice come through that said, "Who in there?" Now, he also said that he had some malfunctions with his personal car at his home and also with his garage door. And he's never had that problem before and has never had that problem since then. Now, he, of course, was not the only person who had a lot of issues when he went home. Valerie Washington will not talk about some of the stuff that she had happen. As a matter of fact, after she went to this house the first time, she would never go back again. She ended up sending her supervisor in her place, and later on ended up completely moving, changing profession, and doesn't like talking about this entire thing that happened. So at the end of April of 2012, DCS had petitioned Lake County Juvenile Court for temporary wardship of LaToya Ammons' 3 children. And the request was granted, sorry to say. And I think that kind of sucks, man, that she was like going through all this. And then on top of that, they took her kids, you know what I mean? But DCS found that LaToya Ammons had neglected her children's education by not having them in school regularly. And here's the kind of screwed up part. Apparently, they had also had the same finding in 2009, so just a few years prior. So they did have records of LaToya not having her kids go to school regularly before. So this kind of was like a little bit of a pattern, ghost or no ghost kind of thing. So that kind of sucks. The mom had told Valerie Washington that the reason that she wasn't sending the kids to school regularly because there were times that she could not send the kids because the spirits, quote, quote, the spirits would make them sick and they would be up all night without sleep, end quote. DCS temporarily placed her daughter and older son at St. Joseph's Carmelite Home in East Chicago. And then Ammons' youngest son was sent to Christian Haven in Wheatfield for a psychological evaluation. Even though DCS did give her credit for having such a strong bond with her child, they also said that she needed to, quote, find alternative forms of discipline not directly related to religion and demon possession, end quote. And this was on their DCS case plan. Again, I will have all of that linked down below. They also wanted appropriate discipline, including encouragement, rules, withholding privileges. She could work on those goals during her supervised visits with the children. And she also had to find a job and alternative housing, because if the house is causing all the problems, girl, you got to find a new place to live, obviously. So while she was working on meeting those objectives, police and DCS officials, who obviously believed her in her story, they wanted to continue investigating this house and what was going on. So this is the part that I think kind of sucks. It's like, you know, obviously they believed her. They believed what was going on because, I mean, they're going back trying to help her. But at the same time, they're like, yeah, you got demons possessing your house. You cannot have custody of your kids. And I think that kind of sucks. I don't like the way that they handled this. I mean, I understand that this happened previously in 2009, but obviously there were kind of like extenuating circumstances. I don't know. Like, I have some feelings about this entire thing. You let me know what yours are down below. So on the afternoon of May 10th, 2012, both Mom, Grandma, Captain Austin, and two of the other police officers that were present on the initial visit went back to the Carolina Street home. Now, the police officers were actually visiting after work hours, and they were joined by Father Maginot and then two Lake County officers that were in fact on duty, one of which had a police dog, and then DCS family case manager Samantha Illick. Now, Illick was there on official capacity, and she had told reporters that she volunteered to go in place of Washington because, of course, Valerie Washington did not want to go back. She said she was much too terrified, which I don't blame her. Okay, I'm finished, so we're just gonna finish telling this story. Okay, so a county officer took his police dog around the home, but the dog didn't really show any interest anywhere. So of course, this is like one of those like corpse dogs, and he just didn't hit on anything, but everybody else went to the basement. DCS caseworker Samantha Illick ended up touching some kind of strange liquid somewhere. She said that it felt slippery yet sticky between her fingers, so she went to go wash her hands off. And then Father Maginot had told the police that he really wanted them to check that dirt underneath the stairs. He wanted to see if maybe there was a pentagram, personal objects, anything that might have been cursed. He said that a pentagram might indicate a demonic presence and possible portal to hell. And this is what the Lake County Police were looking for. Again, this was all written in their police report. He also wanted to see if somebody had possibly died in the house and was possibly still buried underneath those basement stairs, and maybe that's why it wasn't cemented over, and that would explain a lot of the paranormal activity. Now, one of the police officers ended up digging a 4-foot by 3-foot hole right beneath those stairs, and they found a pink press-on fingernail, a white pair of women's panties, a political shirt pin, a lid for a small cooking pan, socks with the bottoms cut off below the ankles, a few candy wrappers, and then a heavy metal object that looked like a weight for a drapery cord. And again, this is all on the police records. Nothing else, though, was found, and afterwards the officers replaced the dirt and raked it over. Father Maginot ended up taking some blessing salt, which he said was a barrier to prevent evil from crossing it, and he spread it under the stairs and then throughout the basement. Now, at that point, Illick said that she was later standing in the living room with the rest of the group, and remember that hand where she touched that gross stuff? Yeah, so she said her left pinky finger started to tingle, and actually, like, it turned turned white. Several of the officers corroborated this and said that they also saw this. She started complaining that it felt like it was actually broken, and less than 10 minutes later, she started to have like a full-blown panic attack, like couldn't breathe, so she walked outside to wait for the rest of the group. Now, when the priest started questioning the mom inside the house, she started complaining of a headache again, shoulder pain, and according to police records, she then joined Illich outside because she just, I guess, couldn't handle it. You know, I wouldn't be able to handle that neither. Now, I think it's important to note here that after Illich ended up leaving the house, so Samantha Illich, the caseworker that was there in place of Valerie Washington, that she had a string of medical problems after this whole visit and encounter with the goo. About a week later, she got third-degree burns from a motorcycle on that same hand. And then within 30 days, she also broke 3 ribs jet skiing, broke that hand that had the goo on it when she accidentally hit a table. And then she also broke her ankle when she was running in flip-flops. And again, this was all like in a matter of just 30 days after this incident. And she too later said, like, yeah, I will never go back to that house. You will not catch me dead in that place. Austin said that he left the house as soon as it turned nighttime. Like after his last experience, he was not going to be there. Now keep in mind, this was an officer who had investigated murders, rapes, armed robberies. He had been shot at, drug lords, you name it. And this man did not want to be in this house after nightfall. Now, the other officers, they continued to walk through the home on the main floor. So as I said, it's just like one floor and then the basement. And they didn't notice an oil-like substance dripping from the blinds, and they thought that maybe the mom or grandma might have done it. So to make sure that that wasn't happening, they ended up wiping all the oil off the blinds, removed everything, and then they stood outside the door and guarded it and make sure nobody could get in or out. And about 30 minutes later, walked in to check, and the blinds were just seeping with oil again, just like, I mean, running down the blinds. So that they could not understand at all. Now, Father Maginot had told the police that this liquid, this oil, was actually a manifestation of a paranormal demonic presence. After Maginot left the home, he wrote a report detailing his findings and asked Bishop Dale Melczek, I'm going to put the name down below for you. He asked him permission to perform an exorcism on LaToya Ammons. Now, Maginot stated later on that he said the bishop had never authorized an exorcism in 21 years of being a bishop, and that Melczek initially actually denied his request because, you know, it has to be like a church sanctioned exorcism. And he told Maginot to contact some other priests who have actually performed one before, because Maginot had never done such a thing. Maginot said that he had contacted the other priests to give him a ritual for a rite of minor exorcism, which does not require church approval. The priest he consulted with told him to look it up on the internet. So apparently you can perform a minor rite of exorcism if you look it up on the internet, which I think is hilarious. Now, before he performed this minor rite of exorcism, he actually did an intense blessing on the Carolina Street home to expel any bad spirits. And then that same day, Maginot performed a minor exorcism on LaToya Ammons, the mom. Now, this ritual consisted of prayers, statements, and appeals to cast out the demons. Now, 2 officers and Samantha Illich were present and attended this ritual, and they saw everything. And Samantha Illich later said that she left believing that something was for sure going on. Although she wouldn't go as far as to say that it was necessarily demonic, she said that she did get chills during the nearly 2-hour ritual. And, quote, "We felt like someone was in the room with you. Someone was breathing down your neck," end quote. After the minor rite, Maginot said that Bishop Melczek gave him permission to finally exorcise LaToya Ammons. The ritual is the same as the minor rite of exorcism, except for it's a lot more powerful because this does have the church's backing. So that's the difference if any of you guys were wondering. Now, Father Maginot ultimately ended up performing 3 major rites of exorcism on LaToya Ammons, 2 of them in English and 1 in Latin. And this was in June of 2012 at the Maryville Church. Now, at this point, Mom and Grandma actually found a new apartment in Indianapolis. So when the exorcism process first started, she was still living in the Carolina Street home. But again, remember, she had to meet those DCS requirements. So she had to find a new place. So she got a new apartment midway through the exorcism process. But she would drive back for the mother's exorcisms and also her court hearings. Maginot said that he ended up blessing the family's new home and apartment to prevent any more problems. And the final exorcism that was performed in Latin was in June 2012, and apparently it worked because Maginot said that he has not seen Latoya Ammons since. However, he has had to perform several rites of exorcism on people who have entered that house since then. Now, Charles Reed, the landlord of the house, so the guy who actually owned the house that Latoya was renting it from, he stated to the media later on when interviewed that he didn't believe any of this. And he had no other previous tenants who had ever reported any such problems. And in all of his years of being a landlord, he thought he had heard it all. But this was the first time that demonic possession was ever used as an excuse for someone to not pay their rent. He ended up selling the property when this whole thing blew up on social media. If you guys don't know, Zach Bagans from Ghost Adventures, who, by the way, I have met, and I don't know personally, we're not best friends, but I have met him a couple different times. And I will say he is a little dramatic and over the top, but I can also say that he is very scientific and he wants to find the truth. You know what I mean? He really goes above and beyond and sometimes pushes things a little too far to find the truth. And when he found out about this story, he did purchase this property sight unseen from Charles Reed. Now, the mom did eventually regain custody of her 3 children in November of 2012, so it didn't take her too long at all after she got her new place in June, so about 6 months, and DCS did continue to check in on the children and make sure they were going to school and everything was okay until the case was completely closed that following February. Now, Latoya, of course, called her children's return the happiest day of her life, which I'm sure we can all understand and relate to. She said they screamed and jumped up and down when she picked them up from the DCS office there in Gary, Indiana. So I was happy to see that she did end up getting her kids back. Now, I will tell you that Zach Bagans did end up doing an entire documentary on some of what happened with Latoya, but then what happened after he bought the house. And apparently a whole lot of things happened, and he ended up having his vision permanently impaired because of this house there in Gary, Indiana. And he destroyed it, had it bulldozed over completely. So this house no longer exists, but he does have a documentary on Amazon Prime. I will try to find it and I will link it down below. I think it's called Demon House, actually. So let me know, what do you think about this entire thing? Do you think that this really happened? Do you think, because I feel like there's a lot of people involved in this. Police officers, DCS workers, and every single person who left the house, whether it was in Latoya Ammons' case or even afterwards when Zach Bagans bought the house, because I watched that whole documentary, and every single scientist, every person who was there just to perform experiments ended up having some kind of health problem, accident. Something insane happened to them. And, I just feel like it's just too much to be a coincidence at this point. So I'm really curious to hear your guys' thought. Have you ever heard this story before? Again, would you like to hear another one? Because I don't know, I find these real, true paranormal cases very, very interesting. I'm sorry if you guys saw me look down a lot. Of course, I did have notes. It took me a very long time to write everything down, and because I wanted to make sure I kind of stuck to the facts and what we actually had evidence of. Again, I still to this day think that Dr. Joffrey and his staff members were the one that called DCS, and that's why he didn't want to let go of his doctor's notes. But again, that is just my opinion, just reading and going over through the entire case. Again, if you guys would like to hear more stories like this, please just give it a thumbs up, give it a comment, let me know. Yes, Alex, I would love to hear more, because this stuff really, really interests me. And that is really why I created this channel, is so that I could kind of have an outlet for things like this. I'm sorry, I will get better at doing my makeup and doing this, but I just really wanted to get this out before Halloween. So I really hope you enjoyed it. I love you guys so, so very much. I really do appreciate you guys continually supporting not just this channel, but my other one. So if you haven't checked that one out yet, it's called The Not So Evil Stepmother. I will link it down below. I hope you guys have a fabulous Halloween. And until next time, see ya.